Erica, Tanamachi, and Brandon too. Such an amazing film, right?
You're so far away. It's like, what is it, between two ferns? We're
All right, so let's get this Q&A started. And again, we're so thankful that all of you made it out for the film, to support the film, and that you're staying to learn a little bit more about the film. So just to get us started, I just want to say I love this film. It's, I see a lot of documentaries for work, and this is definitely one of the favorites that I've watched this year. And I think it's because it provides such this really rich, holistic portrait of a talented star student athlete. But along with that, it's showing the community constellation that's surrounding and supporting the star, right? So, the story is as much about her gift with the game as it is about her personal journey and the struggles and the challenges and the changes that she's going through on and off the court. So Erica and Brandon, I'm sure everyone wants to know, how did you first get into contact with Ashley and her family, and what sort of informed the way you chose to tell the story in terms of balancing her personal life, but also thinking about her family too?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for to the San Diego Asian American Film Festival for having us. We're so honored to be here. Thanks for taking the time out of your day. It means a lot. In film school, I was told, when you're a filmmaker, you're taking every minute you create something, you're taking that from someone else, and you want to make it worthwhile, and I take that to heart. So I appreciate all of your time today. The hour and the 98 minutes you gave me. My husband and his family grew up playing in the Japanese American basketball leagues. My father-in-law actually was on the Nisei Athletic Union, which was the first league that post-incarceration. So through my husband's family and cousins, I met Jamie. And then in our first meeting with Jamie, she told us about Ashley. Briefly told us about Ashley's story. Ashley at the time was she was a rising sophomore. It was, the early summer of 2020. And this was like a Zoom call. And we had interviewed a lot of people because we were trying to tell the story of the JA leagues, and we were looking for sort of contemporary stories to help tell that story. And once we met Jamie, it was full stop. And she thought that she was just entertaining different people. She was suggesting all different kinds of people to interview and for the film. And I circled back with her, I don't know, a week or two later. I'm like, well, what about you? And can we meet Ashley? So we had a meeting with Ashley over Zoom. And at the time, Ashley and her family, they're so special and dear, and they really trusted everything in Jamie. And so Jamie took a lot of responsibility for even introducing me to her, and I think there was always something at night probably for her for the full time of filming where it was like, oh my gosh, how is this gonna look? But she had faith, and I told her that if there was something that they didn't like or whatever, I would take it out, and I definitely honored that. But when Ashley started filming with us and agreed to it, I think she thought, she thought that it was kind of like an Instagram reel. She had a lot of random people coming in filming her. You see her, she was pretty, thousands of people knew about her before we even started entering the picture. So that was sort of, once they started though, inquiring about her family, she always got very quiet, didn't really want to share. So it took us a year and a half of getting to know, of getting access to her family. I mean, we were filming her family at the donut shop and all of that, but actually entering the house, it was the first time we were, it was Brandon and me, and Brandon was shooting at the time. Brandon had joined the project as a producer, he's an amazing producer. And we sat outside of her house. We were gonna follow her. I'm like, I wanna follow you from your house to school to just capture that journey. And we were texting, I think it was 5 a.m., we're outside. But no worries, if you don't want to let us in, that's okay, we'll wait for you. And then she texted, you can come in. We're like, okay. So that was our first, like what you see in that film, that first kind of scene of us inside. So I guess the constellation was very important to me, but it also took a while to get to it. But I had to tell Ashley a lot, like, this film isn't just about you. It's about all these other people. And Jamie would tell her that too. Like, you are here because of all of these other people. And there was a constant reminder, because sometimes I think she felt so alone and so like she was carrying the weight of the world. And I would see that, where she felt like she was translating for her parents in places and, just, which I can understand that weight of the world of feeling alone. And I think there was a reminder of like, you're not alone, and it's important for us all to see that because we have so much to learn in seeing that, documenting that constellation, like you said. So, sorry, that's a very long answer.
That's a great insight. And, it just reminds me that, like, I don't know how many of you are documentary filmmakers out there, but documentaries take a long time to make. And a lot of the lessons that Ashley learns on the court about trust and communication and respect, like those are all things that documentary filmmakers also have to take into consideration in just developing that relationship with the protagonists even before you start filming. So, and you can really see the care that you guys put into like documenting her journey, and I think that's so apparent in like every frame. And so, like, I've seen a lot of sports docs, and how many of you are like sports documentary fans out there, like 30 for 30 and things like that, right? So it's, it's not uncommon for sports documentaries to delve into an athlete's like family and community to really try to like give us a little bit of a slice of their background. But I think that Home Court really elevates this exploration, and I think that it does it through the powerful montages, right? So those sequences where the scenes are cutting between like Ashley's intense like games, and then you're like in her parents' donut shop, right? And like I did not expect that kind of juxtaposition to be happening, and you really like make that connection clear. Like it really vividly captures just like all the work and the sacrifice that goes into sustaining her dream. This also really resonated with me as a Korean American because my parents ran a liquor store for 25 years, and I just thought about, wow, like while I'm at school doing extracurriculars, they're at the shop, like regardless of holidays, 365 days a year. So I really connected with that. So I just wanted to see if you would just talk about how you designed these scenes, and what were you aiming to highlight about this complex interplay between, personal ambition and family sacrifices?
Yeah, I mean, you say it. I think it was very hard to get Ashley in scene with her family, to be honest. So often they're not, even like, especially Ashley and her mom. So near the end, like that, I think was when we were in the edit, I feel like that's when it started to come in. I think it was after we'd hired a couple of consulting editors to come in and help just offer notes, and that was one sort of takeaway, was just to put like that. It was just kind of an aha, like, oh, this is a way to show like they're still here. They're not here, but they're here, right? Like they're supporting and they're doing the thing that they're doing, but so that they're not forgotten. I think it's like what Lita says, this like, maybe people think I'm a bad mom because I'm not there. And I if you notice that bad mom is twice in this film, there's never bad dad. Like we never question the dads, but I feel like the moms are always questioned. And not only that, it's like the guilt is so high it's like you can just never do right. And so I feel like I just wanted to constantly bring her in that way. So that was sort of the, yeah. If you want to say anything else.
Pretty much you said all of it. I think I'd like to add to that. That juxtaposition is really needed in stories like this, between like first generation and second generation parents and children. Just really seeing how, like you said, the sacrifices that parents make in order for their kid to be successful too, and just really kind of, like uplifting their stories and all of the behind the scenes work that they do as well. It just goes back to kind of like what Lita says, like we give Ashley like a lot of love, but we just don't show it, and that's like kind of a way we kind of show that like on screen itself.
Yeah, and I like totally noticed it, and I loved how you gave Ashley's mom like space to really talk, and you see also sort of the evolution of who she is as a person, as a mom. Even when she's like talking about the way she raised Ashley was different from the way they raised Ethan, right? So why don't, like, I wanted you guys to maybe think about, like, I mean, I love the depth and the nuance given to this complicated, like, mother-daughter relationship. And I'm sure all of you, when you were watching the letter scene, I don't know how many of you ugly cried, but I definitely ugly cried during that scene. So what inspired you to include that particular moment? And what did you want us to understand about these kinds of unspoken emotions and tensions in this mother-daughter relationship?
Yeah, so as you're filming, it's like you're tracking various stories. One of the main stories that we tracked was Ashley's growth as a leader. And the mother-daughter started to come in kind of semi-early on. There was definitely, it felt like there was fracture, and I wasn't quite sure what the fracture was, and it took me, years to really kind of dig in and figure it out a bit more. And then, so you can see this, but then we were for a while, I guess this was the end of, I guess it was 2022, and we were like, just trying to figure out how are we gonna repair this relationship, or not repair, what's the, close out, right? The film has to end, Ashley's gonna go off to college, how do we close their relationship and leave the audience and all of us feeling satisfied? So that was sort of like a lingering question that kept me up at night. And we had various, if you've seen Minding the Gap, right? Like Binglu, that was Diane, who was the producer, suggested for, I don't know if those of you who've seen it, but it's kind of like this in the way that it's a skateboarding movie, but it goes also into trauma. And in the filmmaker, it's a story about him and himself, and he interviews his mom, right? So that is kind of the climax where he asks her all of these hard questions, but he's also older, and it's his film that he's doing. So, but I had even talked to Ashley, like, would you talk to your mom, because we got to a place where we're like, what's gonna happen? They're not talking. And so, Brandon and I had moments of just figuring out different storylines, crying, because I was so moved by their whole story, one idea we had was, kid you not, have Lita write a letter. And have her read the letter. So I was literally making up stories, which is not really right for documentary, for the documentary filmmaker to jump in, but I was trying to find ways that I could make it feel organic. So then I get a call, around this time when I'm trying to figure this out, Jamie calls me, as she did. We were talking constantly, so I could kind of figure out what was going on. She's like, oh my God, Lita just wrote the most amazing letter to Ashley. And I'm like, what? And she's like, well, for senior night, I always ask the parents to write letters to the student or to their kid. And it's just incredible, you have to read it. And I was like, oh my God. What did I so that became the piece. And then I asked, after, we filmed it, I asked Lita to read it for me on camera, and even just getting Lita alone in her home for an interview, we did one, out of 3 years of filming. It's not easy, right? She is the life is very hard and very full in that way, and I think, but in that interview, she read the letter, and it was just, that was a really, and at the end of that interview, I remember feeling God, it's I always feel so grateful to people who are in my films that to give me their time, recognize they have no idea really the impact, no one can understand the impact and what she has done as in sharing her story and being vulnerable and allowing other people to experience it, because I think that's just so huge. And after that interview, I just thanked her profusely, and she was crying, and she's like, no one ever asks me about me. Thank you for listening. It's kind of like what you were talking about with your mom. But yeah, anyways, yeah.
Yeah, so, no, I'm so moved even like hearing you talk about this process. And yeah, before the Q&A, Erica and I were talking about like how I had done a little documentary project about my mom, and it was like my first time talking to her, but through the camera. So it was just like, it was like really weird, but also humbling for her to be sharing all of this about herself, right?
Oh, and one more thing I'll just add is that Ashley, the other piece that was very important to Ashley, because when I was talking about like trying to find some reconciliation with mom, and she was like, the one thing I really don't, I want to be clear, like, we're not okay. Like, she didn't say it in that word, but she was very sort of like, I don't want it to look like we're all good. And that was really important for her in that moment. And so it was important that I left her interview after to that, sorry, timing, but anyway, yeah, anyway, so, and now I don't think she even remembers that she said that to me then at that time. But it's just interesting how like a snapshot in time at that time, how it's so, we're still teenagers and she's still like not able to process, and it's gonna be it's like lifetimes of processing, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that we have just a couple moments, and I know that folks out in the audience might have some questions, so can we take like a couple questions from you all? Any questions out there?
Braves. Oh my God. Hi.
I just love the documentary, the movie, I just love it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so like maybe...
Suzanne David.
Oh,
and this is Suzanne. She's one of our co-executive producers. Very great.
Do you mind if I ask a question?
Oh, yeah, of
Even
course.
though I'm a little close in some ways. I'm just curious, both Erica and Brandon, how would you say that this film changed you?
I know. Like you go first. I have to think. I don't know.
I can go
Yeah,
first.
you go first.
Gosh, that's a hard question. I came onto this project in 2020 when I just like turned like 22, and then like I'm 26 now, so I spent the first half of like my early 20s on this film. So I think it was like a really healing experience for me, just getting to witness Ashley's growth and just how her relationship with her family has changed. And yeah, I just see a lot of myself in Ashley. I'm second generation Cambodian, she's also second generation Cambodian. Reflecting on my teenage years, I definitely like see myself in her too. And just kind of being able to talk to Lita and Bao and just kind of understanding like what it's like for them as first generation immigrants to like raise a kid here allowed me to kind of understand like my parents better and like the sacrifices it took for them to raise me and my sister. So I think overall, yeah, it was like kind of therapeutic for me, for Erica, and for all the people involved in the film.
Yeah, I think for myself, it hit me sort of in the middle of this recognition of like who we are and where we come from. And I had this moment where I realized, oh, in this way, like, yes, it's this like happy story where she ends up at Princeton, but there's also this underlying story that hit us all very deeply, which, I imagine is sitting in your heart of this kind of loss of culture in a way of like what happens as Americans as we come to America. And the multiple generations and how we lose touch of like where we came from and who we are. And I think, especially in today's climate, I think that's problematic in ways. I think there's something beautiful about being all together, and I think it's also really important for us to celebrate our different cultures and remember who we are. And I think for myself, like my ancestors who were Jewish, who weren't, I was raised not knowing I was Jewish. So I think that hit me deeper because I always felt this like Judaism connection, and I never really understood why. And then when I was older and then learned the stories, I was like, oh my God, like it's just this just this aha of like helping us know who we are. It helps inform that. So I guess, yeah, I guess we all sort of processed, yeah, and grew as artists.
Oh,
Thank you.
One more question.
One more. I have a comment. I just really love the documentary. It was really well done.
Thank you.
I don't think America knows about the history of the Vietnam War, which affected Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam. So thank you so much for even showing that scene about the grandma, the Khmer Rouge. So that is something, as an educator, I feel so sad because Ashley did not know her own history about what happened to her people. She's just lost in this, society where she goes around, do school and do life, and no one looks at her. So that's wonderful. I just want to appreciate both your work. And I have a question. Can you discuss any scene or moment in the film that specifically addressed or critiqued the model minority myth and the impact on Asian American communities that are not usually, like aware of, such as Cambodian, Laos, from Hawaiian, from the Polynesian, like, any scene in particular that?
So can you, any scene that?
Any scene or moment that specifically addressed or critiqued the model minority myth?
Oh, yeah. You want to take that first?
I think that there are a good amount of scenes that, really kind of highlight the model minority myth, or kind of like reject it. I think the one where, Jamie talks about Ashley getting into Princeton. Cambodians came here, a lot of them as refugees with really not that much money or resources. And I think, donut shops were essential in the Cambodian American community just to kind of get them started and kind of just start achieving that so-called American dream. Like Ashley's family was able to, be business owners, but even then, compared to, Jamie's family or even her teammates or classmates, Ashley's experience growing up financially and class-wise was very different too. And I think, overall it just highlights, not all Asians are kind of the same in terms of education level or class. And then just the whole film in general, you don't really see many Asian Americans in sports, let alone Cambodian American women. So I think Ashley just herself kind of embodies that rejection of the model minority myth. And yeah. And it's good that you mentioned yourself being an educator too. And I think, it really reminds me too about the importance of showing home court in educational spaces. Even next weekend, I have the privilege to kind of showcase home court as part of the first Cambodian American Studies conference. So in California, they're starting to roll out. Cool. You'll get to see it again next week. But yeah, I think, just stories like this and kind of folks pushing to kind of uplift and highlight Southeast Asian stories will change a whole new generation of kids and them being more closer to their culture and their history in general. So yeah.
And I would even just add, to highlight or underline what Brandon said about Ashley. People were, in earlier cuts, we had more scenes where she was cocky and loud and, said things that maybe were unlike, and people struggled with it. And my editor and I used to always, all of us were so frustrated because if she was a man, no one would think twice about it. If she was a white man, no one, it would not even come up. But every multiple screening, even funders didn't want to fund it because she was not likable. And that was their, that in one of the takes that they saw, they didn't think, and it's that kind of thing where you're what are you what, was she supposed to be this docile, quiet, gracious young woman? And and she's not that, and that's what makes her amazing. And so yeah.
And I think with that, we'll have to close out the Q&A. So let's give another round of applause.
Thank you so much.
So thank you again to all of you for supporting Home Court, for enjoying the film, to watch a film that really gets at the heart and the grit and the resilience of not only Ashley, but just like even thinking about Asian American girls in sports. So, and just challenging those kinds of stereotypes and just rewriting the narrative, flipping the script. So thank you again.
Thank you so much. Oh, and don't forget to vote.
Please vote.
Thank you.
5.